Hello, everyone. My name is Maxime. This podcast was created to help you live your life to your fullest potential. Let me introduce myself. I am a coach, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and the world's #1 whole food, plant-based body recomposition expert. From supporting and losing family members through cancer, including my ex-partner, from sleeping in my car and being $60K in debt, I turned my life around in 1 year and rebuilt myself completely while building multiple successful multi-six-figure companies. Throughout the years, I've built a solid foundation through health and fitness that has allowed me to level up in other areas of my life, including health, relationship, family, and business. Through those ventures, I've been able to help over 600 people from around the world completely level up their mindset and get in best shape of their life on a plant-based lifestyle. I wish this podcast to be of service on your journey. Enjoy the episode. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Maxime Show. Sounds weird to say because it's my name. Today, I'm joined with Katrina Fox, who is the founder of Vegan Business Media, and we'll be talking about personal branding in vegan businesses. So very excited about this conversation. Katrina, how are you doing today?
I'm really good. Thank you, Maxime, and very excited to be here and looking forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah, same here. It's been a while since I had a podcast on business and personal branding, so very excited to dive into it. But before we get into it, your area of specialty is vegan business. So I'd like to get into like your vegan story. What made you want to go vegan and ultimately go into that space for your career?
Yeah, so I do work more, I just should just say I do work more broadly. I do specialize in working in the vegan and plant-based space, but I also work with a broader kind of purpose-led entrepreneurs, as long as they're not kind of selling or promoting things with animal products. So I do work a little bit broader, but yeah, under the banner with my Vegan Business Media, which is a side of my business, I do specialize in working with vegan and plant-based entrepreneurs. So in a nutshell, 27 years ago, back in the UK, where I'm originally from, I was actually on an animal rights march. It was a big national march to protest a farm that was breeding kittens for vivisection. And I wasn't vegan at the time, but I was vegetarian. So I'd been vegetarian without knowing the name since I was 11, when I found out that the beef burgers on my plate were once a cow and the chicken were actually once a live chicken. I was kind of horrified because I had quite a big connection with animals, particularly my cat when I was young. And so I kind of inadvertently became vegetarian from quite a young age. But back in 1996, so 27 years ago, I was still vegetarian. I was on this coach bus that going to this national demonstration, and basically got talking to a school teacher when I offered her a cheese and Marmite sandwich and said the cheese is vegetarian, and she said, "Oh, I don't eat dairy, I'm vegan." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" I didn't know the word. And she told me, and she was very kind in the way she told me. And it's funny enough, I actually just posted about her this week. The fact that she was very kind in the way that she communicated to me, bearing in mind I'm on a bus full of animal rights activists who, she could easily have turned on me and said, "How dare you be on this bus and bring dairy onto this bus?" But she was absolutely lovely, really kind, explained everything. And I kind of went, oh my gosh. So she just explained the realities of what really happened in the dairy industry. And I was just shocked. I thought, how did I not know this? And so I was one of those people. I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to go vegan. I sent off my Animal Free Shopper, which was a little printed book back in the day because the internet, wasn't really around properly back in 1996, and set about pretty much immediately, or as quickly as I could anyway, removing all animal products as much as practically possible, which is the definition of veganism. And yeah, so I've been vegan for 27 years. My background is journalism. And then in 2015, I decided I wanted to help vegan business owners and entrepreneurs. And I tried to figure out, well, how can I do that? Because my background is journalism. So I wrote a book called Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. And I interviewed more than 60 vegan entrepreneurs from across the globe, put in my own insights around PR, marketing. And yeah, things kind of went from there, really. Wrote for Forbes for a year in 2018 about the vegan and plant-based business sector before, the mainstream media were really covering this in a big way. And yeah, I've just loved seeing the growth and explosion of veganism. I always make a little joke. I never thought I'd be cool and trendy in my lifetime because I still love disco. But here we are. So it's fun and it's exciting. And I just love seeing more and more people embrace it and some of those myths to be broken, that vegan food doesn't taste nice. I think that those kind of myths are being well and truly shattered, and you can get all kinds of things. You don't have to give anything up. You can wear all your favorite clothes, shoes, without the pain and the cruelty. And a lot of the times, with vegan products, they are also more eco-friendly as well. So all good.
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely went vegan before it was cool, and now it's obviously catching up that it's the thing to do, and then more people are starting to eat plant-based. And so looking into, you mentioned like PR, business, building a personal brand in the vegan space. I can go each direction. How do you start? So for someone that wants to build their own business that is in a plant-based space, and I'll just, put myself in my shoes where I was several years ago. It's like, what's overwhelming? It's such a small niche. There's not a lot of people. Like, how do you recommend people kind of get started on that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's obviously many different types of vegan businesses. So often we think of vegan businesses, I think food often immediately comes to mind. So it's, do I start a vegan cheese brand, or do I, a vegan fashion company, for example? But there are also service-based businesses as well. And we're seeing more and more vegan professionals coming into the space who want to work with ethically minded business owners. So I think there's a couple of questions you need to ask. I mean, one is, what's the aim of you starting your business? Like, why do you want to start your business? And it could be a broader mission. You want to help people, animals, and planet. But I think you also have to think of it in terms of for yourself as well. What kind of business do you want? Do you want to build a business that you're then going to scale, and then you eventually want to exit it, maybe sell it, or even be acquired? Because we're seeing some of the smaller or small to medium-sized vegan brands, for example, selling to being acquired by a lot of the bigger multinational corporations. Or do you want a lifestyle business? Do you want a business that you can run from home? Run it online, for example, which is what I do. So you can work from anywhere with your laptop. So I think you have to decide what kind of business do you want, look at what your skill set is, and then see how you can make that happen. Now, the interesting thing is, I know you mentioned there, you said something about, there's not that many people in the vegan niche. One thing we have to remember now is, if you're starting a vegan business now, in many cases, for example, if it's a food business or a fashion or a skincare business, you don't want to be serving just vegans necessarily. You want a much bigger audience. You want to get the flexitarians, which are people who, want to reduce their meat but may not necessarily want to go fully vegan. If in fashion and skincare, people, there's a whole broader group of people who are just ethically minded consumers who maybe want something more natural, or they want something that is not tested on animals, or contains animal ingredients, or is better for the environment. So I think you've got to think broader than just the vegan market. Now, obviously, if you're a service-based professional, I know there's some service-based professionals that only want to work with vegan and plant-based businesses. And I think that's possible, but I will be honest and say I do think still that the vegan and the plant-based space is still very young. It's not a huge, a really mature space, so it's still growing. So it's perfectly fine to, continue to have other clients as long as they fit within your value system, while you build up and grow your reputation within the vegan and plant-based sector. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And it's a lesson. It took me 2 years to learn that, because originally I own over 5 vegan businesses. And it took me over 2 years to learn the lesson of, like, I don't need vegans to be more vegan. I need more people to eat more plant-based. So let me just open it up to people that want to eat more plant-based. And that opened up a whole new market and allowed us to have a lot more impact in people's health. So yeah, there is that kind of, like, sometimes that limiting belief when you start of, like, I just want to work with vegans. Like, there's people that maybe aren't ready to make the full commitment yet, but that want to kind of, like, dabble into it, and you have the opportunity to help them on that journey.
Yeah, and it does depend on the type of business. So, for example, because I do, under my personal branding umbrella, I offer PR strategy. Now, if I'm going to help promote someone or promote their business, then you have to be a little bit careful, because obviously I'm not going to promote a meat-based restaurant, for example, or a company that sells animal-based leather goods. Whereas, for example, if you're a therapist or you're in the health-based space, like my partner, my wife is a clinical hypnotherapist and naturopath. She sees cattle farmers, dairy farmers come to see her. Now, depending on what they want, she has turned quite a few of them vegan, even the dairy farmers, which I find quite funny. But if it's appropriate, but even if it's not, like if they were coming for relationship counselling, she will still see them, she'll still help them. So I think you've got to have your own internal compass, whereas some people, may go, no, I only want to work with vegans. So you have to decide that for yourself, but just bear in mind, if you are just, there's the whole thing of, the niche. They say in America, the way you Americans say it is the niches are in the riches. We pronounce it niche, so it doesn't sound right, but it is good to niche down. But I think you just have to make sure that sometimes, particularly in the beginning, you're not necessarily niching down so far that you're not able to build your business. You might start a bit broader with more purpose-led and niche down, or vice versa. I mean, I've kind of niched down, and then I've also broadened out mine because I've been in the vegan business space for about 8 years now. What I've actually found is I actually want to be in rooms with, I want to get out of my vegan bubble sometimes, because when you're in rooms with other people, particularly those who are purpose-led, like they're really good on the environment or they're really good on, helping people, for example, it's actually good for vegans to be in those rooms because they can kind of see, you're a kind of living example of, I like my sparkle. Like, people tell me like it's one of my brand values. So I'm sparkly on the outside, but also I hope on the inside. So, I tend to be quite fun to be around. And I think that again, it dispels the myths around veganism that we're all kind of angry, miserable, people,
angry at the world.
Yeah, exactly. And we might well, but of course, there's lots to be angry about. Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing that, but I think it's good for us to be in those rooms so that we can have those conversations, so that when they, for example, if they're running, I know a friend of mine, for example, has been in the more broader purpose-led space. And now the people were organizing an event, and they've insured, he said, I can help with that. And he's insured that just by default, the food that's going to be around for that network is all for that event is all plant-based. And nobody's pushed back because, it's all tasty and nice, but it's just like you can have those bits of impact. Another friend of mine who's been, part of a couple of memberships that I've had, is an author, and he is now on the national board of Association of Authors. And again, it can have those influence and get in the door. So I think it's important for us as well, as well as being in it, because it's nice to, of course, to come be around people who are part of your tribe, who do get you. But it's also good, I think, to kind of get out there into the broader world so that we can help shift those conversations and bring more people in to the vegan lifestyle. Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we talk about building and scaling a business, obviously PR, personal branding, all that becomes very important. What are some of the key things that people should focus on when they're looking for personal branding?
Yeah, so the reason I've kind of come into what I do, because I think sometimes, particularly for a service-based business like myself, you need to kind of look at all the different skills that you've got. And I'm also quite what is called a multi-passionate person. So I like a lot of different things. So I've built up a lot of different skill sets over the years, from my journalism, and then, as I mentioned, segued into PR strategy, content marketing, but personal branding I've kind of landed on because I feel like, particularly nowadays, well, of course, you can build a business without necessarily being too much at the front of it. But I think really nowadays, at least someone who's part of the business, if it's not the founder, then maybe it's the CEO, or you've got another person who's involved in the business. Somebody needs to be the face of that business and to be driving it forward. For example, on LinkedIn, which is a platform for professionals. I think that's really important because nowadays people don't just want to buy a product, they want to know more about the company, particularly with younger, we're seeing more and more younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, the alphas, they're all coming in and they're wanting to know more about the company. What are the company's values? What do they stand for? So, and the best way I think for if you're starting a business is for you as the founder to share that and to build your personal brand. And the thing about personal branding is we've all got one. If you're online in any way, if you send emails to people, then you've already got a personal brand, but you're not crafting it in a particular way. So you're letting people make their own minds up about you, and you can come across as a bit chaotic and a bit all over the place. People are like, well, who are they? What do they do? What do they mean? So when you actually consciously build your personal brand, then you can control the narrative, you can control how people are seeing you. And it also helps in terms of the content you create, because it helps you to pick out what we call content pillars. So, or you can think of them as content buckets, which are kind of topics that you want to talk about, that fit with your business, that fit with the personal brand that you want to create. And it actually becomes a lot easier to create authentic content that's going to resonate with your ideal clients. And those ideal clients could be your customers, but they could also be, for example, on LinkedIn, collaborators. If you're starting a vegan food brand, for example, you want to be connected with buyers, potentially with people, with distributors, and other people within the space, so that you can get opportunities to speak and to get those other opportunities. So that's the importance, I think, of that personal side of it. Because yes, of course, you want to get PR and publicity, you want to do your marketing and get sales, and build up the brand side, the business side. But I also think it's important to craft that personal brand for the founder as well, so that they can really get out there. If you think about it, I'll just end on this little note. If you think about Amazon and Microsoft, they've got those brands themselves have got massive followings on social media, but Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates have got even more following, because of the person brand. Same with Richard Branson. You've got Virgin, you've got the brand, and then you've got Richard Branson, and more people will follow people than they will a brand. And there's been quite a lot of research on that. People will buy we buy from people, essentially. And I think particularly in this space, when you're in this kind of ethical space, the vegan or the plant-based space, I think that's even more so, because sure, if you need to buy a juicer, you're going to go on Amazon or whatever, and you're going to buy the brand, and you're not necessarily thinking, right, who is the founder of this particular juicer. But I think in the more ethical space, if you're going to buy some lipstick and you want a natural, you want to know, well, who is the company? I certainly go around and poke around and find out. And that's what I find a bit frustrating with a lot of ethical business owners, is their about page, they don't put themselves out there. And I think they're doing themselves and their brand a disservice. And I think a lot of it is around the fear. People think, oh, but what if people don't like me? Then they won't buy my product. Well, that's true. You're not going to be able to please everybody. The whole point is to attract people who do resonate with you and what you do. Some people will put vegan front and center, like Miyoko Shino. When she started Miyoko's, she's no longer with the company because there was a bit of a situation going on there, but she was very, from the beginning, it's a vegan company, not plant-based, it's a vegan company. Some people are very front and center with that. Other people are much more stealth. Like my partner doesn't mention it on the website. We've just got a line saying, the no products, animal-based products are used. So the vegans can find you, but, you're not scaring off those who aren't ready to embrace that. So, that's a bit of a long answer to your question, but those are some of the key things I think are important to, yes, you need to promote your brand, but you also need to put yourself out there, because no one can really talk about your brand as well as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of people, is putting themselves out there to create that brand, right? And I agree with you. Think of Richard Branson, you think of Elon Musk, you think of Bill Gates, because they build such a great personal brand. Whatever they touch after will automatically have some success, right? You think of...
Yeah, we're not sure about Twitter though, are we? But
different conversation.
Might be the exception, but yeah.
You think of The Rock and starting to tequila, the tequila company. It was worth $3 billion now or something. Conor McGregor, when he came out with Proper 12, 600 million valuation. Just having a personal brand and whatever you attach to it after is worth a lot more money than if you were to build it without having a personal brand. So building a personal brand requires you to push yourself out there. And that can be very challenging for a lot of people. And it sure was for me when I started. And I'm sure it was for you as well when you started. So what are some of the tools that you can give to people that are like, Katrina, I don't really like to film a video of myself. I don't like to hear my voice. I don't like my photos. I don't want to share these things. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So For me, it became a little bit easier. My background is actually performing arts. So my degree back in a very, very long time ago is in performing arts. So I think when you're passionate about something, you take to it. So I took to it quite naturally, like getting on stages and talking and hosting panels. I actually love all of that, but I get that not everybody does. But here's the thing. Remember what you just said about, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. I think the key is to actually take the focus off yourself, because when you do that, when you say, oh, I don't want to make a video, I don't want to get up on a stage and speak, you're making it all about you. Now, if you're someone, and I'm guessing if you're listening to this show, you're someone who wants to do some good in the world, you want to help people, animals or planet, you want to help people to grow, whatever it is that you want to do. If you're starting a business, or even if you just want to be a leader in your space and to grow a movement, for example, you've got to think of the publicity or the putting yourself out there, growing the personal brand. It's actually not about you, which sounds a bit contradictory. But what I mean by that is when you put all the focus on you, it's all about the ego. It's, oh, I'm going to look silly. Oh, what will I look like? What will people think of me? You're making it all about you. And what I suggest is you flip that script and say, right, by growing my personal brand, by putting myself out there, by taking these steps that are getting out of my comfort zone, you're actually serving your audience or your greater mission. And by taking the pressure off yourself, it just kind of calms you down. So when you start to think of those things as service, it just flips it. It takes away from the ego. It takes the attention away from yourself. And I think it can help give you a bit more of a motivator towards getting yourself out there. The other thing I would say is that even if you think what you're saying has been said 1,000 times before, often people will hear it. The one time they hear it from you, they might have heard it, loads and loads of times before. But when the way you say it and the fact that it's you saying it can get people to turn to take an action, whether that's to go vegan or to, go buy your course, to, your self-development course, for example. They hear it from you because there is only one you. And that's the beauty. I think that's what I really love about personal branding, is there is only one you. So even someone who's perhaps had a similar background to you, who has very similar skill sets to you, they still won't have had your life experience. Even if you're a twin, and you've maybe had some similar experiences, you've grown up together and you're in the same field, for example, you still only experience life the way you experience it. And that is very unique to you. So your whole special skills, your values, your character, your desires, all of these things are wrapped up in this special package called you, and only you can deliver the message that you want to in the way that you want to. So what I would say to people, and certainly when I work with people on their personal brands, we find out where their audience is, and we also find out what platforms they're comfortable being on. So are they, or even if they're not comfortable, are they willing to go on a stage in person? Are they willing to host a webinar online? What social platforms would be best for them? And I do encourage people, and I do work with them, to get them out of their comfort zone, but also to start somewhere where they do enjoy or they would like to have a go. So it might be hosting a podcast. It might be an audio-only podcast, for example. So it's working with people to find out what their natural energies are and then working with them to practice. I'll give you a quick example. When I first trained as a journalist, and this is what, 26, similar time to when I've been vegan, 26 years ago, again, the internet wasn't around. So we had to pick the phone up and request to interview people. And I hated it. My friend Cassie and I, who did the course with me, we hated using the phone and it was just such a major thing. If email had been around, I'd have been so happy, but it wasn't. So, but the more I did it, then it just becomes second nature. When I got my first journalism job, I was just on the phone all the time. My friend Cassie went on to work for, some of the big platforms like the BBC. Like, we got over that initial hiccup. So often I think we have that fear, like you said, of, oh my gosh, I've got to turn a camera on and speak to it, and I'm so self-conscious. But it's the more you do it, then it becomes second nature. So those are my two key things. I would say flip the script, take the attention off yourself, and remind yourself constantly that by putting yourself out there, you're not being vain and going, oh, look at me. You're actually serving your movement, you're serving your ideal clients to make the world a better place. that alone, I think, is an interesting mindset shift. And the other is to to figure out which steps are the right for you to take, and to get the practice and do them, and know that the more you do something, the better at it that you will get.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of great points. It's definitely putting serving first, putting the attention away from you makes the world of a difference, because then what you share is very different information, right? Because I'm sure, like, I'll admit I've been there. You're sharing information to try to make you look good versus something that would actually be valuable for your audience, right? And when we start off, I feel everyone's like that, because you're trying to justify the little insecurity of being on camera or kind of sharing something vulnerably. But then you're right. My first video I ever made is terrible compared to the ones I make now. Like, it's light years of difference between the two of them. But we all started there, right? We all started with like, oh, hello, everyone, and saying every 2 sentences, every few words, and kind of stumbling on our words.
But you know what, Maxime, people like that. I think it's that whole thing, particularly now, like we've gone through kind of phases, particularly with video, where we've gone from kind of the basic, then it was kind of, oh yeah, we can use all these tools and it's flashy. But then I think we're kind of back to a stage where actually people want authenticity. They want, and I know that's an overused bit of a buzzword in the marketing world, but people do, they want to feel genuinely connected with you. And I think sometimes if something is super perfect and exact, it doesn't necessarily resonate as much. So if you're doing a video and maybe you stumble over a word or whatever, and then you correct yourself, yeah, you could edit it out, or you can just leave it in and go, yeah, okay, good, that person's real, they get it. And I think there's another saying, done is better than perfect, because often we can spend time procrastinating and editing video and editing this to the point of trying to make it perfect, and you've wasted all that time. You could have put out 3 different videos on that, because you will get better the way the more you do it. And so I think you just have to kind of let go of the perfection. Like, I know you said, oh, your first videos are terrible, but at the time, for the people that were listening to them or watching them, they were probably delighted with them and delivered great value.
Oh,
and yes, you can improve. Yeah. You can improve, but sometimes we're our own harshest critics. I think that's important to remember as well. And I think as long as you're on video, I think as long as your audio is clear and people can hear and understand you, and you're delivering value, that's the key thing. If you're delivering value to your audience, that's the main thing. And I think that's important for people to remember, because we often think, and that again comes back to, oh my God, it's all about me. People actually don't care about us. Even the most ethical people, they don't. When we listen to a podcast, we watch a video, or we read someone's social media post, even if they're talking about themselves and sharing a story, which of course you can do, they actually don't really care about us. We want to be inspired by other people, or we want to learn something. We're thinking, what's in it for me? So I think as long as you're delivering value in your video or your audio, platform you decide to go, and if you're delivering value and you're genuine, then that means a lot. And I think a lot of people will get on board with that, and they appreciate your authenticity.
Absolutely. So would it be fair to say that your personal branding is like your reputation to a certain extent?
Yeah. Excuse me. So you can edit that out, or you can leave it in. I don't mind. So with personal branding, it incorporates a lot, but you're right. It's one of the key things. It's how, there's a famous saying that I think is attributed to Jeff Bezos: your brand is what other people are saying about you when you're not in the room. So yes, your personal brand, it does take in your reputation. It's how you're seen, how other people see you, but it incorporates like some of your natural, like your energies, your values, your skills, your experiences, your life stories, what's important to you. Like, it incorporates like a whole concoction of things that go into building your personal brand. So yeah, it is. It's how you're seen in the world, is in a nutshell. So yeah, reputation is very important.
And so what would you say are some of the top mistakes that people make when it comes to building a personal brand?
I think the key one is really not necessarily taking the time to actually build it. I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of that, if I'm honest, I didn't consciously, I've got to put my teeth back in. I didn't consciously set out to build my personal brand necessarily in the vegan business space. I kind of just did it. And look, it's worked out okay. But I think sometimes we just kind of go into it. And for example, when I first went into the space, my focus was to get known. So I got my book, Vegan Ventures, out. So I just wanted to switch from being known as a journalist to, the author of Vegan Business, Vegan Ventures, and to be in that vegan business space. So I was on a load of podcasts, I was, flying internationally, speaking at events, like doing all of that stuff. So, I built that brand. But what I didn't do was be clear in what I was actually offering in terms of business. So I think people still saw me as a journalist. So, they were constantly, wanting me to give them free publicity by, if I was writing for Forbes, I was writing for other outlets. And I wasn't really being clear on what my services were. And I actually had one person say, "Oh, I hired someone to do that. I forgot you could do that." And that's on me. So I think it's important to build your personal brand. So it's been really helpful for me because I've been kind of transitioning into working with personal branding as an umbrella. It's bringing all the skill sets that I've got, but I put it under the umbrella of personal branding. And it's actually been really helpful for me to do those exercises and to find out what are my values, how do other people see me. And one thing I think people can do if you're listening or watching this is to put something on social if you're brave, or just ask your circle of people, what are the top 3 things? What are the top 3 words you think of when you think about me? You can even say to them, "Look, I'm working on my personal brand or doing some branding work. What, when you think of me, what are the top 3 words that come to mind?" It can be really revealing, and you can use that, to inform your content and the way you run your business. So I think the key one is to actually build it, say, right, what is my personal brand? What do I want my personal brand to be? And actually go through the process of understanding yourself, really getting to know yourself, and deciding, how you want to build your personal brand. And as I mentioned earlier, it actually helps to inform you. Once you've done that process, it helps to inform how you show up in the world, the type of content you put out. If you're going to do public speaking, what kind of stages do you want to be on? Who do you want to serve? What rooms do you need to be on? What networking events are you going to go to? When you go there, how are you going to show up? So and it incorporates physical as well. Obviously, there's a kind of style or element. So, as you see, I love if you're watching this on video, I've got a sparkly jacket on. I actually love sparkle and bling, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm actually a brand ambassador for a range of glitter boots for a vegan shoe company. So people often tag me if they see sparkly things, what have you. So that's kind of part of it, but it's also obviously much more than just what you look like. It's all of those internal things as well. So really, I think the key mistakes are to not figure out what your personal brand is. The other one, which I saw a shocking example of on LinkedIn recently, was somebody who's the founder of an organization. I won't name any names. And people were asking questions about their brand. And the person was so rude. They basically said, "I'm done with answering these stupid questions." Like, it was just shocking. So that's like how not to build a good personal brand. So just be careful in the way. And I think this is particularly true of people who are passionate. If you're passionate about your cause, for example, sometimes, we could see a comment and get angry and then immediately reply. And I think particularly when you're running a business or, if you're a professional, you've got to kind of take that deep breath and go, right, these are my values. This is my personal brand. How am I going to, if I'm going to respond, how am I going to respond in a way that is on brand with yourself? So, I guess the other thing is to kind of, just make sure that what you are doing and what you're saying, the way you're communicating is in line with who you want to be seen as.
Yeah. So staying in alignment with your mission and your values as you're communicating, as you're creating content, as you're interacting with people. So question for you, being in 2023 at this point, do you think that you still need to go and do like speaking on stage and be out in the public, or you can build a pretty successful brand by just being online and ultimately never leaving your hometown?
Yeah, look, you can. I think that's been the way for some time. And it's interesting the way things kind of shift. So obviously people were building their brands online, having online businesses only before the whole COVID situation. Obviously, when that hit and we had the lockdowns, then obviously online exploded. But now what we're seeing is people want that a lot of people want that in-person connection. So yes, you can still build a business online. But I would also argue as well, it's good to kind of get out in person as much as you can, because you've obviously got local people or in your area or in your country. And I think people do want that in-person connection. We're seeing now people, they're out and about there. We've missed that, and we want to be kind of back in person. And I think you can make quite powerful connections and relationships with people when you meet together. I mean, obviously Zoom, online with video is the next best thing, where you can see people, and then after that is audio. But yeah, I do think so, and it depends how you want to do it, because I know a lot of people are saying, right, I actually want to minimize the amount of travel I do. For example, like maybe I don't want to be, getting on as many flights and, traveling all over when I don't have to. So I think there's certainly that aspect to it. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be constantly flying across the globe, unless you particularly want to. So I think, again, it's coming down to finding a balance between what you want. If there's a particularly important event or conference that's in your area and you think, right, that's going to be a brilliant networking opportunity to meet people in person, whether you get to speak on that stage or even just go along to it and attend it, you can kind of choose those particular things rather than doing it randomly of, oh, yeah, there's all this stuff, I'll just go to it. I think it's being discerning about what you do. But look, if you're someone who perhaps you can't get out. Obviously there are people who perhaps can't get out physically to go to events for whatever reason. Yes, you can still build a business online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like the in-person aspect as well. And I'm spending more money now to go to in-person events. It's just on Zoom, like you can connect with all those people in the room, but you don't get to have a one-on-one conversation in the corner of the conference room and go more in depth because everyone else is listening. So there is I do like that energy difference from being in person, but again, it is still obviously possible, because that's what I've done, to build everything online and never have to be anywhere. But it is fun to be able to go in person.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are people actually that I know, because I'm originally from the UK, but I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I mean, there are people that I know, particularly in the vegan and the plant-based business space, who I've never met, but I actually consider we have built up such a good rapport and connection online over time that we feel like we're good friends, and then when we meet, if we do meet in person, it'll just be a bonus. So it's certainly possible, I think, to do that. And obviously with Zoom you can go into breakout rooms, there's some networking events I'm part of where you can go into Zoom room. So I think it's perfectly possible. But I think it is the icing on the cake when you meet in person as well, especially if you can, perhaps, do it over a bite to eat or something. There's something about, I guess, that in person that's a bit extra special. So I think if you can do it, but if you can't, and as I'm aware, people might not be able to travel for whether it's if they physically can't, or they don't have the resources to, because like you said, there's obviously that much higher investment. Same with holding your own events as well. Holding your own physical event can be great, but there's also those extra expenses that are incurred. So I think you have to figure out what's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so talking about all these things, PRs, marketing, building your reputation, building your personal brand, one part about business that people don't talk about is how hard it is, and how it's probably the biggest self-development program you'll ever go through to be able to grow and build and scale a business. What's been your experience with that and the people that you've worked with, and obviously for building your own companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I literally said that in my book, Vegan Ventures. That was one of the key things. And when I interviewed, because I interviewed more than 60 vegan entrepreneurs to kind of get their insights, and they were from across the globe, from a whole different range of industries. And one of the key things they said, the main quality you needed was resilience. And they all said that, it literally does force you to grow as a person, because it is hard. And I think many people don't talk about how hard it is, particularly when you see on socials, people share their successes. We all do it. We share our highlight reels rather than the real grind that's gone on behind the scenes, the long hours, the disasters that happened. There was one company here, I remember interviewing them, called Vegan Perfection. So they brought in vegan products from the UK and brought them to Australia. The very first shipment, the people who were handling the goods left it out in the sun at Dubai airport or somewhere, and most of it went off. So they lost their first shipment. They almost didn't get off the ground with their business. And he explains that in the book. So things like that, there can be just disasters that will happen, unexpected things happening that you just can't even plan for, but you have to deal with. So yes, it's I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, I'm going to leave my job, or I'm going to leave the corporate world, I'm going to start my own business, I'm going to just work these few hours. And what they actually end up doing is having a job where you're working more hours. And I mean, obviously, if you love your business, there's the whole, I know there's a saying that, oh, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. I think that's
up to a certain
little
extent.
bit idea. Yeah, exactly. There's going to be stuff in your business that, especially when you're starting out, because often I think when people start out their business, you're doing a lot yourself. You're bootstrapping, you're doing everything yourself. And there's going to be stuff. I mean, one of the things we offboarded very early on was doing the books, the accounts, because I was doing those when my partner and I moved to Australia. We actually opened a vegan and eco hair and beauty salon to get our residency. And I was initially doing our accounts, but at the end of each quarter, I'd have to bring someone in to check that I hadn't messed it up. And it got to the point where I'm thinking, we're paying this person to come in and correct a lot of what I'd got wrong. I think we should get a bookkeeper. And that was one of the things. So obviously when you can, you outsource it, and that can free up your time. But there's always going to be challenges and market conditions. I mean, look, we saw the past 3 years that what happened to the events industry or the hospitality industry were decimated by something that nobody foresaw. Nobody could have planned for that. And so, yeah, it is. I think it is. And I think it is one of the important things to do. I do encourage people to do personal development. I think it's as important as professional development. Learning professional skills is great, but I think you also absolutely have to work on yourself, even if it in terms of where you communicate with people. That's so important. I think particularly when people are ethical business owners, or they're coming from a cause, sometimes they're working from their own wounds and they want to start a business to be a form of activism, which I think is great. But then you've got to make sure that the way you treat people is paramount. Relationships with your staff, with your customers, etc., is really, really important. And you have to learn how to emotionally regulate yourself. So emotional intelligence, I think, is really important. So personally, I've done heaps of self-development courses, and it's a work in progress. We're all still a work in progress. And, I think it's important to continue to do that. But yeah, and I don't want to put people off starting a business, but don't underestimate the challenges in their many forms that come along. And yeah, you've got to dig deep to pull out those qualities. Particularly, as I say, resilience was the number one quality that people said you need when you're running a business.
Yeah, and I think there's so much to, again, people don't really often talk about that, but there is the aspect of, you mentioned when we first started the podcast, is what are you building it for? Are you building it to be like a lifestyle brand? Or are you building it to sell? Because if you're building it to sell, it's a different beast. It's a lot more work. It's way more stress. You have to deal with more people, but the payout is bigger. Versus if you're a lifestyle brand, then you're still the operator. You're still doing pretty much everything. You may have a few employees. And so for the past few years, the past year or so, I've been transitioning from operator to owner. And it's been great in terms of time saving. So just the biggest thing for the people listening is that if you have a little bit of additional funds, hire one person to help you do the thing that you absolutely don't want to do, which for you is bookkeeping.
It was, absolutely.
Right. So just hiring that person, having a little bit more money, hiring the second person, and kind of being able to buy your time back, because it is strenuous to do everything consistently for years on end. You're just eventually you're just I kind of want to go back to my job because I don't have to worry about all this stuff anymore. I just get to work, I get my paycheck, and I get to relax after. And and I don't know if that's a belief of yours, but I think entrepreneurship is not for everyone. I think some people can get into it and are just like, yes, I love the challenge. And some people are like, you know what? I don't want to worry about all this stuff, right? I just want to go get a job.
And I think that's perfectly valid. I think sometimes in the entrepreneurial world, there's a bit of people look down on people who have got a job. I've certainly been to webinars and seminars where people have gone, people who, do a job, they look down on them. And I think that's right. It's like, what works for you? Sometimes I feel like, again, in the book Vegan Ventures, when I've interviewed some people, some of them actually, they left their job to go part-time so they could build their business. Then they went full-time into their business. Things were going great, but then something happened. They had to go and work part-time again. And that's okay. It's not a failure. They did what they needed to do to continue to grow their business. And like you said, for some people, they might go, you know what, I've tried this thing. I actually just want a steady paycheck, and that is okay. Again, it's what's right for you.
Yeah. And it's what kind of stress level are you willing to handle,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
when you work a job, there's no stress besides you going to your job. But the other stress is your income is the same every month. Versus if you go into entrepreneurship, your income could be whatever you want, but it could also be
Yeah.
really low, but it could also be really high. So you
Yeah.
have to be
And
okay
you can
with
have the
those
stresses
fluctuations.
within the working of entrepreneurship as well. So yeah.
Exactly. So it depends. For me, it was a freedom part. I just couldn't feel
Yeah.
constrained in my ability to earn more. So I was like, I just can't do the job thing. I need to do this thing. And then, yeah, you get into it and then you discover the hardships and the challenges that come with it. And then you get employees and a team. You're like, payroll, like, oh, we're short this month. Who's going to pay the balance? I got to pay the balance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it becomes very interesting.
Definitely.
Awesome. So, Katrina, last question for you. Any words of wisdom you would want to share? It's for two different people that want to start after we've had this very honest conversation, and then people that are currently on their journey to kind of help them move forward.
So I think if you're thinking about starting a business, one of the key things is, well, again, figure out why you want to start the business and what kind of business you want. So those are the important things. And have a look, see what other people are doing, and what you think you might like to do. But then the key thing, I think, is the importance of market research. So what is it you want to do? What are your special skills? And what's the audience or the market for it? And how can you be different? Because if we go back to, say, vegan businesses, back in the day, so I've been vegan 27 years. Back in the day, you could virtually be almost the only vegan cheese in town. But not anymore. There is, the market is saturated, and obviously, there's room for people. But you've got to think, right, what can I do that's different? And do people want it? And will they buy it? So I think you need to kind of do a lot of that research, kind of market research, to find out, where you want to go, what people want, and how you could help to service that market. So that, I guess, is for people who would like to start a business. For people who are already in it, and again, it depends on where you're at in it. Are you happy in your business? What's happening at the moment in terms of the world, inflation and all of that? How are you doing in your business? How are you tracking in your business? I think the key thing is, and yes, unless you're a multinational corporation, I think it's important, particularly for ethical business owners, to really kind of identify and focus on the audience of conscious consumers, I guess, and really, because often you can't compete on price. If you're, producing goods, for example, you can't compete with the likes of Nestle if you're a vegan chocolate brand at the moment, because there's a whole thing I could say about the need for governments to support ethical businesses and not penalize them for doing the right thing. But anyway, there's another conversation. So I think that the thing is to look for, additional markets, or look for how you can continually get in front of your ideal market. So just staying on the example of the vegan chocolate brand, the dairy-free, the allergy market, for example, is huge. So you can be promoting to them, and not necessarily leading with vegan, but it can be more leading, we're a dairy-free brand, and we've got these other attributes that, we're good for the environment, etc. So I think it's to really kind of stay focused and look for potential new markets and how you can get in front of them and position them in a way that you're not just competing with the likes of the bigger brands. So coming up with those creative ways as a founder, as I mentioned, building that personal brand, getting in front of people as much as you possibly can. I recommend people to be on LinkedIn, because that's the one real kind of social platform that is geared towards professionals, and it's the easiest way to connect with other people in your field who can give you those opportunities, whether that's speaking gigs or partnering for collaborations and so on. So really kind of focusing on your personal brand, as well as getting your business brand, if it's different, and sometimes it might be the same, in front of your current audience more, as well as potentially looking at new markets.
Beautiful. Well, Katrina, thank you very much for sharing all that knowledge and wisdom and providing value to the audience. For everyone listening, I'm going to link all her links below to her website, to her book that she wrote. Everything will be down there, so you'll be able to go and check it out. Show her some love on the links. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And Katrina, thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much, Maxime. It's been a pleasure.